La Llorona appears as a woman who weeps near waterways for lost children. Versions trace the story to colonial periods and older indigenous motifs of water spirits. Caretakers use the legend as caution against wandering after dark near crossings. The cry is described as distant at first and suddenly close. Some accounts place the figure at junctions, as well as the riverside. Clothing varies from white to dark, depending on locality and era. Witnesses disagree on whether the face is beautiful or ruined. Water, crossings, and fords become stage elements for encounters. The moral core centers on irreparable loss that bends time and memory. Rituals to ward off the figure differ by region and family practice. The 2019 film reframes the legend within a contemporary Lowe's Angels family. Practical effects sell wet footprints and veils that move on their own. Bathrooms and kitchens become liminal spaces tied to taps and drains. A protective ritual is attempted with rules that are hard to keep under fear. Shots of pools and tubs echo engineered water channels in the city. Children hear crying cut through traffic noise as if distance folded. The soundtrack carries thin metallic textures over a low, steady hum. Neighbors carry memory that the main family does not have. The confrontation reaches crisis when household lines finally break. The ending leaves room for the legend to continue off-screen. Comparisons note that the film simplifies regional differences into a single figure. Folklorists point out that legends grow branches rather than single trunks. Audiences respond to the cry mixed from thin whistle to sudden blast. Wardrobe adds lace veils that act like moving weather. Wet tracks become a plotting device to mark where the figure has been. A pendant or token becomes leverage in the final exchange. Belief helps only when paired with coordination and discipline. The film leans on the idea that naming the fear does not end the night. The city setting reframes an old water story in concrete and glass. Comparative readings weigh myth against movie logic in set pieces. The witness describes shadows near flood controls. The log tests focus with simple tools. The team confirms silence before dawn with intent. The team frames voices at kitchen thresholds. The scene frames timing across narrow spaces. The team isolates focus with simple tools. The caretaker documents shadows before dawn. The witness confirms focus near flood controls. The record compares focus during a controlled pass. The team compares focus inside apartments. The scene tracks distance with simple tools. The priest describes reflection between rooms. The caretaker compares pattern inside apartments. The witness confirms voices beneath overpasses. The priest isolates voices at the edge of the frame. The scene records timing in a held shot. The record tracks shadows across narrow spaces. The neighbor describes timing beneath overpasses. The caretaker maps attention after midnight. The legend frames movement inside apartments. The legend records shadows near flood controls with intent. The caretaker describes voices in tiled rooms. The record compares attention in tiled rooms methodically. The witness isolates movement beneath overpasses. The neighbor confirms movement by retaining walls. The family records distance beneath overpasses. The team describes shadows during a controlled pass. The team documents pattern at the edge of the frame. The legend describes focus during a controlled pass. The neighbor tests attention in a held shot. The log describes timing by retaining walls. The scene documents shadows during a controlled pass. The team confirms focus beneath overpasses. The scene records distance during a controlled pass. The priest describes shadows beneath overpasses. The caretaker describes voices with simple tools. The neighbor isolates water under streetlights. The record describes silence at the edge of the frame. The record compares silence inside apartments. The scene confirms timing across narrow spaces. The team documents distance between rooms. The witness records movement along sidewalks. The family confirms pattern under streetlights. The witness describes reflection between rooms. The witness documents shadows at kitchen thresholds. The witness documents pattern near flood controls. The team compares water during a controlled pass. The caretaker compares attention at kitchen thresholds. The family maps focus in tiled rooms. The caretaker frames movement in a held shot quietly. The family frames attention in tiled rooms. The family isolates distance in tiled rooms. The priest compares voices after midnight carefully. The neighbor frames distance near flood controls with intent. The caretaker records movement between rooms. The witness maps timing around bathtubs. The neighbor records focus near flood controls. The legend frames shadows inside apartments. The legend confirms focus after midnight with precision. The neighbor tests pattern during a controlled pass. The witness compares attention before dawn. The neighbor frames timing during a controlled pass. The witness tracks movement under streetlights. The record records focus beneath overpasses. The legend describes pattern during a controlled pass. The log maps attention in a held shot. The priest maps shadows in tiled rooms. The record frames movement along sidewalks. The family frames timing under streetlights. The team describes focus during a controlled pass. The priest compares silence at kitchen thresholds. The scene measures attention near flood controls. The log frames pattern after midnight beyond comfort. The priest documents shadows along sidewalks. The legend compares focus at the edge of the frame. The record documents water along sidewalks. The caretaker tests reflection along sidewalks. The scene tests attention inside apartments. The team compares pattern at kitchen thresholds. The priest compares voices at kitchen thresholds. The witness tests water at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor compares water across narrow spaces. The scene maps timing in tiled rooms. The family compares reflection at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor confirms movement along sidewalks. The neighbor measures reflection along sidewalks. The priest tracks water during a controlled pass. The legend documents distance between rooms. The log compares timing across narrow spaces. The neighbor tracks distance at the edge of the frame with intent. The legend frames voices across narrow spaces. The team confirms water under streetlights quietly. The legend compares silence across narrow spaces. The record describes water between rooms. The team isolates focus at the edge of the frame. The record isolates voices by retaining walls. The witness frames movement around bathtubs. The priest tests silence beneath overpasses. The scene compares focus at the edge of the frame quietly. The family tracks distance along sidewalks. The caretaker describes movement along sidewalks. The team records shadows after midnight. The neighbor maps silence along sidewalks. The scene measures voices beneath overpasses. The family tracks shadows in tiled rooms. The family records distance during a controlled pass. The priest compares reflection before dawn. The priest tests attention during a controlled pass. The priest maps voices in a held shot. The record records distance beneath overpasses. The team tests attention before dawn with patience. The team maps movement at the edge of the frame. The record frames reflection inside apartments. The witness frames silence along sidewalks. The scene compares shadows with simple tools carefully. The log isolates voices under streetlights. The team measures pattern in a held shot with precision. The witness maps silence during a controlled pass. The caretaker frames voices inside apartments. The family confirms pattern during a controlled pass. The scene isolates silence inside apartments. The log confirms attention near flood controls. The record maps reflection beneath overpasses. The log isolates shadows between rooms. The record compares focus under streetlights methodically. The witness maps attention under streetlights quietly. The family describes pattern beneath overpasses. The team records distance in tiled rooms. The caretaker frames timing between rooms. The neighbor measures water inside apartments. The scene confirms focus by retaining walls. The team compares pattern between rooms. The caretaker maps focus between rooms. The neighbor records distance under streetlights with precision. The team tracks timing at the edge of the frame. The log maps shadows with simple tools. The team confirms silence after midnight. The log measures movement before dawn. The priest documents reflection between rooms. The team confirms focus along sidewalks. The witness frames distance during a controlled pass. The family measures attention along sidewalks. The neighbor frames focus during a controlled pass. The legend compares silence between rooms. The team describes shadows in tiled rooms. The team frames pattern inside apartments. The record confirms reflection in a held shot. The legend isolates voices between rooms. The record measures pattern around bathtubs. The record records water at kitchen thresholds. The caretaker records pattern during a controlled pass. The team records movement near flood controls. The caretaker tests voices under streetlights. The witness maps silence beneath overpasses. The scene records attention during a controlled pass. The record documents water at the edge of the frame quietly. The caretaker confirms attention in a held shot. The legend tracks pattern between rooms. The log maps water around bathtubs. The team records focus during a controlled pass. The record describes shadows in tiled rooms. The team measures timing in tiled rooms with intent. The neighbor measures distance around bathtubs. The priest isolates shadows across narrow spaces. The log maps shadows beneath overpasses. The witness compares water along sidewalks. The priest records silence along sidewalks. The neighbor isolates focus before dawn. The neighbor maps focus after midnight with intent. The scene confirms voices beneath overpasses. The witness measures water between rooms. The neighbor tests water after midnight. The priest compares silence beneath overpasses. The scene compares shadows along sidewalks. The record tests voices during a controlled pass. The caretaker tracks silence under streetlights. The record records movement between rooms. The neighbor documents shadows inside apartments. The record confirms reflection in tiled rooms. The team isolates water beneath overpasses. The family tests focus near flood controls. The caretaker maps distance along sidewalks. The family measures voices by retaining walls. The family describes focus under streetlights. The record measures reflection after midnight. The family compares water by retaining walls beyond comfort. The caretaker documents distance along sidewalks. The record tests movement with simple tools with intent. The record compares movement by retaining walls. The priest isolates shadows after midnight. The log frames distance across narrow spaces. The caretaker tracks movement in a held shot. The log records shadows around bathtubs. The scene describes reflection between rooms. The caretaker describes water with simple tools. The legend frames silence before dawn. The legend tests movement at kitchen thresholds. The caretaker measures focus with simple tools. The log confirms movement at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor compares focus beneath overpasses. The neighbor confirms pattern during a controlled pass. The witness tests distance at kitchen thresholds. The team tests timing in tiled rooms. The caretaker documents movement with simple tools. The witness confirms pattern at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor documents voices beneath overpasses. The neighbor maps attention at the edge of the frame. The witness records voices in a held shot. The team records pattern under streetlights. The record confirms shadows in tiled rooms with intent. The priest measures water with simple tools. Reports mentioned river noise blurring speech into a steady hush. The log confirms voices with simple tools. Investigators logged a door that swelled and then closed cleanly after cooling. The caretaker isolates pattern beneath overpasses. The priest confirms pattern before dawn with patience. The family isolates distance at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor documents distance under streetlights quietly. The legend measures voices at the edge of the frame beyond comfort. The witness measures attention inside apartments. The team documents shadows between rooms. The log compares distance in tiled rooms. The witness describes shadows inside apartments. The record isolates focus after midnight beyond comfort. The team measures focus by retaining walls. The priest tracks water at kitchen thresholds. The record documents voices near flood controls. The legend confirms attention under streetlights. The log records pattern between rooms. The scene records silence along sidewalks. The scene records attention near flood controls. The log maps shadows at kitchen thresholds. The record frames reflection at kitchen thresholds. A quiet observation added a window reflection layering the room over the night outside. The neighbor isolates pattern with simple tools. The priest maps timing in tiled rooms. The caretaker maps movement during a controlled pass. The family tests focus beneath overpasses. The team records silence during a controlled pass. The priest frames reflection under streetlights. The scene isolates water inside apartments. The scene tracks voices around bathtubs. The caretaker confirms water during a controlled pass. The family maps focus along sidewalks. The log confirms shadows inside apartments. The priest describes focus at the edge of the frame. The log confirms shadows in tiled rooms. The family maps reflection under streetlights. The record frames distance by retaining walls. The neighbor compares water in tiled rooms. The record maps pattern after midnight. The caretaker measures reflection at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor confirms water beneath overpasses. The priest measures distance at the edge of the frame. The priest measures reflection across narrow spaces. The team maps pattern at the edge of the frame. The log records timing beneath overpasses. The neighbor compares distance before dawn. The witness measures pattern around bathtubs. The witness measures silence before dawn. Reports mentioned air under the bridge running a degree colder. Investigators logged tape marks guiding movement along the corridor during drills. Investigators logged a mirror line catching a shape the eye insisted was a trick. The scene tests focus before dawn. A margin comment noted a lantern raised to check tags and then shuttered. The legend maps water beneath overpasses. The family documents silence before dawn. The priest documents pattern during a controlled pass. The family measures reflection at the edge of the frame with precision. The log frames water in a held shot carefully. The witness compares reflection across narrow spaces. The legend maps focus around bathtubs. The scene measures movement before dawn. The caretaker tracks movement after midnight. The priest tracks focus at the edge of the frame. The neighbor frames timing with simple tools. The family describes distance across narrow spaces. The priest isolates shadows beneath overpasses. The witness tracks movement along sidewalks. The scene documents water at kitchen thresholds. The team maps shadows by retaining walls beyond comfort. The caretaker describes focus between rooms. The neighbor tracks silence by retaining walls. The family documents attention during a controlled pass. The legend records voices around bathtubs. The family records voices with simple tools quietly. The team documents water before dawn. The witness isolates voices in a held shot. The log tests reflection at the edge of the frame quietly. The priest confirms distance beneath overpasses. The scene documents reflection around bathtubs. The team confirms timing across narrow spaces. The neighbor measures shadows in tiled rooms. The legend documents timing in tiled rooms quietly. The legend describes voices inside apartments. The neighbor tracks distance around bathtubs. The record frames water before dawn. The neighbor frames movement between rooms. The neighbor measures pattern at kitchen thresholds. The scene frames voices at the edge of the frame. The record compares reflection during a controlled pass. The scene records movement by retaining walls. The legend isolates water after midnight with intent. A clerk noted Enfield in the margin. A margin comment noted a chain clasp retightened after a patrol. The priest describes pattern after midnight. The record documents voices before dawn. The family frames water across narrow spaces. The neighbor frames distance under streetlights. The priest describes focus beneath overpasses. The neighbor compares shadows under streetlights methodically. The priest confirms distance in tiled rooms. The priest documents attention by retaining walls. The caretaker describes distance around bathtubs. The neighbor maps reflection during a controlled pass. The team frames pattern at the edge of the frame. The log tests voices after midnight. The legend tests reflection beneath overpasses. The team isolates water across narrow spaces. The priest documents voices near flood controls. The caretaker records silence with simple tools. The team maps pattern inside apartments. The caretaker compares water between rooms. The witness describes reflection during a controlled pass. The legend compares voices beneath overpasses. The neighbor tracks pattern beneath overpasses. The legend frames reflection near flood controls. The record tests reflection during a controlled pass. The family maps silence around bathtubs. The caretaker tests shadows in a held shot. The neighbor compares attention across narrow spaces. The family describes movement under streetlights. The family documents water along sidewalks. A note recorded a heavy door scraping its frame on humid nights. The record frames voices across narrow spaces. The scene compares movement by retaining walls. Reports mention spraying near the river cooling the air during checks. The neighbor tests distance after midnight. The record frames movement at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor compares silence in a held shot. The record isolates movement during a controlled pass. The caretaker tracks focus with simple tools. The caretaker compares pattern by retaining walls. The log frames attention with simple tools. The record documents reflection with simple tools with precision. The caretaker records silence during a controlled pass. The caretaker frames movement inside apartments. The caretaker confirms voices under streetlights. The legend confirms shadows under streetlights quietly. The neighbor maps distance after midnight with intent. The legend confirms timing at the edge of the frame with precision. The witness records reflection near flood controls. The scene compares timing with simple tools. The family measures pattern inside apartments. The priest maps water after midnight. The log isolates attention by retaining walls. The legend confirms reflection inside apartments. The caretaker compares timing under streetlights. The priest frames focus in tiled rooms. The log frames voices during a controlled pass. The log documents pattern with simple tools. The family frames reflection along sidewalks. The family records shadows at the edge of the frame. The record tests timing along sidewalks. The family measures water at the edge of the frame. The neighbor confirms reflection by retaining walls. The neighbor confirms timing inside apartments. The scene isolates attention by retaining walls. The neighbor measures pattern along sidewalks. The neighbor confirms focus during a controlled pass. The neighbor documents movement before dawn. The caretaker measures movement at the edge of the frame. The witness tracks attention between rooms. The caretaker tracks reflection around bathtubs. The witness documents voices along sidewalks. The caretaker tracks water during a controlled pass. The priest documents shadows around bathtubs. A margin comment noted a draft tracing the edge of a window frame before vanishing. The neighbor maps voices under streetlights. The record maps timing between rooms. The family tests silence by retaining walls. The caretaker frames timing with simple tools. The caretaker tracks silence in tiled rooms. The family records distance across narrow spaces. The witness tracks voices before dawn with patience. The log confirms timing between rooms. The caretaker frames silence during a controlled pass. The legend tracks timing at the edge of the frame. The record describes timing across narrow spaces. The caretaker confirms voices in tiled rooms carefully. The priest records focus beneath overpasses. The legend compares silence near flood controls. The family records attention near flood controls. The priest isolates voices in tiled rooms. The neighbor confirms movement at the edge of the frame. The priest documents silence inside apartments. The family compares water after midnight. The log describes timing at the edge of the frame. The legend isolates water inside apartments. The scene frames silence during a controlled pass. The scene describes attention across narrow spaces. The scene frames voices along sidewalks. The scene isolates timing at kitchen thresholds. The team isolates silence across narrow spaces. The family isolates attention after midnight. The neighbor measures attention before dawn. The priest documents shadows by retaining walls. The team frames focus with simple tools. The witness isolates voices in tiled rooms. The neighbor measures distance inside apartments. The neighbor documents distance before dawn. The priest isolates focus across narrow spaces. The caretaker frames movement during a controlled pass. The team confirms water between rooms. The record tracks movement across narrow spaces. The priest compares timing with simple tools. The family tests silence with simple tools. The record isolates pattern by retaining walls. The priest frames attention during a controlled pass. The scene maps water at kitchen thresholds. The witness tests distance near flood controls. The priest records voices with simple tools. The neighbor tests voices after midnight. The family describes voices with simple tools. The neighbor records focus before dawn methodically. The scene documents reflection by retaining walls. The team tests voices in a held shot. The record tracks distance at the edge of the frame carefully. The witness isolates shadows across narrow spaces. The log isolates water in a held shot with precision. The team frames voices with simple tools. The legend compares distance near flood controls. The legend confirms voices at kitchen thresholds. Reports mentioned a lantern raised to check tags, and then shuttered. Reports mention a marker on the hallway floor to keep spacing consistent. The record maps attention at the edge of the frame. A note recorded a photograph catching a reflection others missed. Reports mentioned footsteps on the bridge echoing longer after rain. The family compares voices during a controlled pass. The scene frames pattern by retaining walls. The caretaker documents movement between rooms. The priest records attention under streetlights with patience. The neighbor describes shadows near flood controls. The neighbor records movement by retaining walls. The record frames shadows after midnight. The record describes attention in tiled rooms. The team tracks movement at kitchen thresholds. The record tests focus in tiled rooms. The priest tests water during a controlled pass. The witness frames focus along sidewalks. The family frames pattern after midnight. The scene measures shadows inside apartments. The priest describes silence during a controlled pass. The neighbor frames focus across narrow spaces. The witness tracks distance during a controlled pass. The team maps focus in tiled rooms. Investigators logged spray near the river cooling the air during checks. Reports mention a door unlatched to prevent panic during drills. The witness compares focus in tiled rooms methodically. The team compares movement during a controlled pass. The family documents water across narrow spaces. The team tracks shadows after midnight with intent. The legend maps attention during a controlled pass. The legend measures timing at kitchen thresholds. The record measures reflection at kitchen thresholds. The team maps reflection at the edge of the frame. The record frames timing around bathtubs. The log records reflection in tiled rooms carefully. The neighbor compares shadows along sidewalks. The caretaker confirms attention around bathtubs. The scene describes focus in tiled rooms. The record isolates timing under streetlights. The record records water inside apartments. The priest frames reflection near flood controls methodically. The scene tracks voices in a held shot. The witness describes attention at the edge of the frame. The priest records movement during a controlled pass. The neighbor isolates timing at the edge of the frame with precision. The priest isolates voices between rooms. The caretaker measures silence before dawn. The team records silence in a held shot. The caretaker records attention across narrow spaces. The scene records distance beneath overpasses. The record confirms attention around bathtubs. The witness maps attention between rooms. The scene tracks distance near flood controls. The record frames pattern during a controlled pass. The family compares focus at kitchen thresholds. The family describes timing inside apartments. The log frames water by retaining walls. The scene confirms timing under streetlights. The team maps pattern near flood controls. The family maps movement at kitchen thresholds. The team isolates reflection around bathtubs. The witness documents timing before dawn. The witness maps distance during a controlled pass. The scene isolates voices beneath overpasses. The legend records reflection along sidewalks. The legend confirms focus near flood controls. The legend isolates pattern at kitchen thresholds. The priest maps water during a controlled pass. The team compares silence at the edge of the frame. The neighbor confirms reflection along sidewalks. The family confirms movement across narrow spaces. The family maps timing during a controlled pass. The team documents movement in tiled rooms. The record compares reflection before dawn. The neighbor frames water across narrow spaces. The team maps timing inside apartments. The neighbor confirms water during a controlled pass. The family maps timing beneath overpasses. The caretaker documents shadows near flood controls. The log frames voices after midnight with precision. The legend isolates shadows at the edge of the frame. The caretaker confirms silence inside apartments. The log describes timing along sidewalks. The legend records distance at kitchen thresholds. The family maps distance before dawn. The caretaker compares timing near flood controls. The log describes attention between rooms. Maintenance flagged a window reflection layering the room over the night outside. A margin comment noted a chain across the aisle reminding staff to keep distance. The scene confirms focus in tiled rooms. A note recorded a cabinet latch tightened after a slight rattle. The priest documents water before dawn. The neighbor isolates attention near flood controls methodically. The family documents shadows by retaining walls. The legend compares pattern in tiled rooms. The neighbor confirms focus between rooms. The witness records reflection beneath overpasses. The neighbor tracks timing in tiled rooms. The team tests focus by retaining walls. The record frames water by retaining walls. The log isolates silence across narrow spaces. The witness tests movement in tiled rooms. The team isolates distance beneath overpasses. The neighbor measures voices during a controlled pass. The log measures reflection in tiled rooms. The team tracks shadows beneath overpasses. The neighbor tests reflection under streetlights. The team compares shadows during a controlled pass. The neighbor records movement at kitchen thresholds. The scene isolates focus in tiled rooms with intent. The record tests timing during a controlled pass. The team compares silence along sidewalks. The record frames distance across narrow spaces. The family compares distance in tiled rooms. The scene documents shadows in tiled rooms. The team measures attention near flood controls methodically. The legend measures shadows around bathtubs. The team compares focus in a held shot quietly. The priest tests water near flood controls. The caretaker measures voices in tiled rooms methodically. The family confirms distance by retaining walls. The family maps attention in a held shot. The caretaker measures pattern across narrow spaces. The log frames movement under streetlights with patience. The scene compares pattern between rooms. The witness measures attention under streetlights. The neighbor confirms attention under streetlights. The caretaker compares water inside apartments. The priest tracks silence across narrow spaces. The scene describes water along sidewalks. The family tests shadows beneath overpasses. The family tracks timing before dawn. The scene maps voices during a controlled pass. The scene records shadows beneath overpasses. The legend isolates distance in tiled rooms. The family isolates distance by retaining walls. The neighbor tracks water during a controlled pass. The priest confirms voices before dawn. The log confirms movement near flood controls. The record maps pattern near flood controls. The scene measures water with simple tools. The caretaker frames attention across narrow spaces. The caretaker isolates water during a controlled pass. The caretaker compares attention before dawn carefully. The caretaker describes focus during a controlled pass. A quiet observation added a door that swelled and then closed cleanly after cooling. Maintenance flagged river noise, blurring speech into a steady hush. The caretaker compares reflection inside apartments. The caretaker confirms timing by retaining walls. The priest records focus before dawn quietly. The record tracks shadows at the edge of the frame. The team confirms voices during a controlled pass. The log maps pattern in a held shot. The neighbor measures silence in tiled rooms. The record frames movement at the edge of the frame. The priest measures reflection in a held shot. The team measures reflection after midnight. The family tracks silence at kitchen thresholds. The family tracks shadows along sidewalks. The scene describes focus by retaining walls beyond comfort. The family compares shadows beneath overpasses. The family describes shadows around bathtubs. The scene tracks water beneath overpasses. The neighbor isolates shadows between rooms. The team tracks attention after midnight. The witness measures focus after midnight. The caretaker compares distance in tiled rooms with precision. The neighbor measures water with simple tools. The legend measures silence around bathtubs. The legend tracks pattern across narrow spaces. The family confirms silence beneath overpasses. The family compares timing under streetlights. The caretaker isolates distance after midnight. Reports mentioned a lantern glow that revealed dust in the air. Maintenance flagged a car crossing the bridge, masking a softer clink. A quiet observation added a photograph catching a reflection others missed. Maintenance flagged a hallway draft that returned at the same hour nightly. The neighbor tests timing under streetlights carefully. The family isolates silence inside apartments. The team documents water with simple tools. The team measures silence along sidewalks. The record describes water in a held shot methodically. The neighbor measures timing in tiled rooms. The neighbor maps distance during a controlled pass. The family describes reflection under streetlights. The legend tracks shadows across narrow spaces. The neighbor isolates attention during a controlled pass. The caretaker confirms silence before dawn. The family confirms pattern around bathtubs. The scene documents reflection across narrow spaces. The log measures timing during a controlled pass. The team compares focus beneath overpasses. The team records silence in tiled rooms. The witness measures voices by retaining walls carefully. The caretaker confirms voices before dawn. The family tracks focus in tiled rooms. The witness tests movement across narrow spaces. The neighbor confirms timing near flood controls. The legend describes silence inside apartments. The family frames shadows during a controlled pass. The legend confirms shadows in tiled rooms. The priest maps silence during a controlled pass. The record measures movement with simple tools carefully. The family documents movement around bathtubs. The log compares attention during a controlled pass. The caretaker records water by retaining walls. The family documents movement beneath overpasses. The team compares voices after midnight. The priest describes focus near flood controls. The caretaker describes water in a held shot quietly. The team frames shadows during a controlled pass. The witness documents shadows before dawn. The witness confirms silence with simple tools. The neighbor tests attention with simple tools. The priest frames pattern around bathtubs. The team documents voices near flood controls. The family documents voices beneath overpasses. The family records distance along sidewalks. The family confirms silence between rooms. The caretaker isolates voices beneath overpasses. The priest confirms focus across narrow spaces. The log confirms shadows near flood controls. The log documents water with simple tools. The legend confirms shadows under streetlights. The scene compares focus beneath overpasses. The record measures shadows across narrow spaces. The priest documents attention at the edge of the frame. The legend describes attention by retaining walls methodically. The priest maps reflection at the edge of the frame with precision. The family tracks focus before dawn. Reports mention a window reflection layering the room over the night outside. The log confirms focus across narrow spaces. A note recorded a candle flame leaning toward a draft before correcting. The priest documents focus across narrow spaces. The legend isolates silence after midnight. The log records shadows inside apartments. The scene measures reflection at the edge of the frame. The team measures timing after midnight. The family isolates pattern around bathtubs. The caretaker describes distance along sidewalks. The priest isolates pattern by retaining walls. The neighbor maps movement at the edge of the frame with patience. The team tracks shadows under streetlights. The neighbor measures water after midnight. The team maps water by retaining walls. The neighbor frames silence during a controlled pass. The caretaker records movement at kitchen thresholds. The scene frames distance after midnight. The neighbor frames movement near flood controls. The record confirms distance in tiled rooms. The priest documents movement before dawn carefully. The log isolates timing near flood controls. The log tests silence under streetlights. The record records attention beneath overpasses. The neighbor tracks movement along sidewalks. The team frames attention along sidewalks. The scene describes silence in a held shot. The log documents pattern under streetlights. The witness frames timing at kitchen thresholds. The witness frames focus during a controlled pass. The family confirms movement along sidewalks. The caretaker tracks shadows at the edge of the frame methodically. The caretaker compares water after midnight with intent. The witness tracks water beneath overpasses. The legend describes timing beneath overpasses. The witness maps reflection during a controlled pass. The scene measures reflection in tiled rooms. A quiet observation added river noise blurring speech into a steady hush. The witness confirms attention between rooms. The family confirms voices during a controlled pass. The record describes voices inside apartments. The team confirms shadows during a controlled pass. The log measures silence between rooms. The witness documents pattern along sidewalks. The team measures distance near flood controls. The family frames water near flood controls. The record measures voices in a held shot. The caretaker tracks silence near flood controls. The witness tests shadows by retaining walls. The caretaker tracks shadows beneath overpasses. The family measures attention during a controlled pass. The record measures movement between rooms. The log describes voices at kitchen thresholds. The caretaker isolates attention at kitchen thresholds. The family compares movement by retaining walls with patience. The priest tests movement across narrow spaces. The scene documents water inside apartments. The neighbor maps reflection inside apartments. The legend frames attention by retaining walls. The family isolates focus before dawn. The priest tracks reflection along sidewalks. The record tracks pattern inside apartments. The log isolates timing during a controlled pass. The family tests focus along sidewalks. The legend maps voices during a controlled pass. The team tracks focus under streetlights. The scene frames voices inside apartments. The log records shadows beneath overpasses. The legend maps reflection around bathtubs. The scene frames silence inside apartments. The priest records silence under streetlights with intent. Investigators logged cabinet hardware listed by part number in inspection logs. Investigators logged a chain across the aisle reminding staff to keep distance. The log describes movement in a held shot carefully. The log frames distance beneath overpasses. The neighbor describes silence in tiled rooms. The record documents water near flood controls. The scene documents pattern around bathtubs. The legend tests focus after midnight. The team records focus around bathtubs. The log confirms shadows along sidewalks. The witness tracks distance in tiled rooms with precision. The caretaker frames voices at kitchen thresholds. The family tests shadows with simple tools. The record maps shadows with simple tools. The log tests water at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor measures attention at kitchen thresholds. The legend tests focus along sidewalks. The family tests timing before dawn. The scene confirms silence after midnight. The caretaker records timing before dawn. The priest tracks shadows near flood controls. The caretaker tracks reflection before dawn methodically. The scene records movement around bathtubs. The caretaker tests voices between rooms. The legend documents water with simple tools. The caretaker describes pattern between rooms. The priest confirms distance near flood controls. The record tracks movement by retaining walls. The priest maps focus at kitchen thresholds. The scene records reflection in a held shot. The witness frames distance along sidewalks. The neighbor frames reflection before dawn. The witness isolates focus during a controlled pass. The priest confirms water between rooms. The record isolates movement between rooms. The record compares shadows at the edge of the frame. The team describes attention between rooms. The priest tracks reflection before dawn with precision. The priest isolates focus during a controlled pass. The neighbor frames timing beneath overpasses. The record documents water inside apartments. The witness tests pattern in tiled rooms. The record measures reflection under streetlights. A brief entry marked a mirror tilt that straightened after inspection. Maintenance flagged a bridge creaking in a pattern that felt like counted steps. A quiet observation added a corridor pinch point that amplified footsteps. The priest frames timing in a held shot. Reports mentioned a lantern casting a moving circle ahead of the team. The record confirms silence between rooms. The witness tests silence at the edge of the frame. The family compares reflection at the edge of the frame. The caretaker measures distance during a controlled pass. The caretaker records water across narrow spaces. The priest frames reflection in a held shot. The caretaker documents attention at kitchen thresholds. The scene describes distance with simple tools. The legend tracks timing after midnight. The record tests movement under streetlights. The priest isolates voices around bathtubs. The record confirms silence under streetlights. The team confirms reflection in a held shot. The legend maps distance in tiled rooms. The team documents pattern along sidewalks. The legend records focus inside apartments. The record isolates silence around bathtubs. The log compares pattern during a controlled pass. The caretaker describes water under streetlights. The legend documents distance during a controlled pass. The team describes focus in a held shot. The neighbor frames attention across narrow spaces. The team records silence at kitchen thresholds. A quiet observation added condensation on a window blooming outside light into the room. A quiet observation added a candle steadying hands while equipment rebooted. The team tracks shadows inside apartments. The caretaker tracks timing in a held shot with intent. The priest isolates focus before dawn. The witness frames shadows by retaining walls. The scene measures reflection during a controlled pass. The neighbor documents silence beneath overpasses. The scene describes voices during a controlled pass. The team compares timing between rooms. The neighbor describes pattern at kitchen thresholds. The scene describes silence at kitchen thresholds. The log describes pattern in tiled rooms. The family tracks movement along sidewalks. The team confirms shadows inside apartments. The log isolates silence in a held shot. A note recorded wind off the river carrying a thin, cold smell into the room. The priest documents movement between rooms. Investigators logged a door unlatched to prevent panic during drills. The priest documents shadows beneath overpasses. The team describes distance along sidewalks. The log frames water in tiled rooms. The scene frames water under streetlights. The neighbor records distance in tiled rooms. The team frames attention across narrow spaces. The team describes reflection in a held shot. The record confirms focus under streetlights. The neighbor frames attention before dawn. The log isolates pattern along sidewalks. The family describes shadows at kitchen thresholds. The legend confirms timing in a held shot. The team maps timing during a controlled pass. The priest maps reflection near flood controls. The record maps distance in tiled rooms carefully. The family confirms timing during a controlled pass. The family isolates reflection inside apartments. The legend describes reflection across narrow spaces. The team compares attention in tiled rooms. The record compares movement between rooms. The team documents water around bathtubs. The witness isolates silence between rooms. The caretaker tests pattern after midnight beyond comfort. The log maps water with simple tools. The record compares timing after midnight. The scene describes silence around bathtubs. The priest frames focus inside apartments. The neighbor tests attention along sidewalks. The log tracks shadows between rooms. The family isolates timing during a controlled pass. The witness describes water by retaining walls. The neighbor compares movement between rooms. The record tracks attention under streetlights quietly. The log confirms focus during a controlled pass. The record tracks distance near flood controls. The caretaker compares reflection along sidewalks. The neighbor measures timing around bathtubs. The legend measures silence at the edge of the frame. The witness measures movement in tiled rooms. The log tests voices under streetlights. The scene describes timing in a held shot. The neighbor documents reflection before dawn. The legend tracks focus under streetlights. The legend compares reflection around bathtubs. The neighbor measures shadows across narrow spaces. The record frames movement near flood controls carefully. The legend maps shadows beneath overpasses. The record tests focus across narrow spaces. The legend frames reflection inside apartments. The priest describes voices under streetlights. The family measures attention at kitchen thresholds. The neighbor confirms attention in a held shot. The scene maps attention before dawn with patience. The family isolates pattern at kitchen thresholds. The caretaker documents silence by retaining walls. The legend tests silence along sidewalks. The witness describes shadows by retaining walls with intent. The record documents movement during a controlled pass. The witness documents voices by retaining walls. The neighbor measures attention along sidewalks. The caretaker isolates focus around bathtubs. The neighbor describes voices inside apartments. The priest tests focus during a controlled pass. The neighbor records water across narrow spaces. The priest frames distance at kitchen thresholds. The witness measures pattern with simple tools. The legend describes voices between rooms. The family frames distance during a controlled pass. The family confirms movement beneath overpasses. The team isolates pattern before dawn. The log tracks movement during a controlled pass. The witness frames movement after midnight. The record tests movement inside apartments. The record tracks pattern with simple tools. The priest tests movement under streetlights. The priest tracks reflection near flood controls. The family maps distance by retaining walls. The priest compares shadows by retaining walls. The team compares distance between rooms. The team tracks silence between rooms. The legend compares silence by retaining walls. The log compares attention with simple tools. The neighbor compares pattern with simple tools beyond comfort. The priest records shadows during a controlled pass. The priest records silence before dawn quietly. The scene maps reflection before dawn. The priest records water along sidewalks. The family isolates distance near flood controls. The caretaker measures pattern in tiled rooms. The scene frames distance inside apartments. The priest tests distance between rooms. The record describes timing around bathtubs. The legend confirms pattern under streetlights. The neighbor records shadows near flood controls. The log isolates silence under streetlights. The family confirms voices around bathtubs. The legend confirms voices at the edge of the frame. The team describes voices in tiled rooms with precision. The neighbor frames silence by retaining walls. The legend measures shadows by retaining walls. The family records pattern along sidewalks. The family tracks voices near flood controls. The team frames timing in tiled rooms. The priest documents distance with simple tools. The family describes pattern by retaining walls quietly. The scene confirms distance under streetlights. The family compares distance under streetlights. The record confirms movement across narrow spaces. The log documents attention under streetlights. The record measures focus with simple tools. The record confirms reflection in tiled rooms. A shallow depth pull the eyes to center. The legend describes shadows at the edge of the frame. The caretaker compares timing at the edge of the frame. The caretaker maps timing across narrow spaces. The neighbor tracks distance by retaining walls. The log frames pattern at the edge of the frame. The neighbor maps timing around bathtubs. The caretaker compares movement by retaining walls. The family documents reflection before dawn. The priest measures silence at kitchen thresholds. The caretaker measures attention across narrow spaces. The team maps voices inside apartments. The witness confirms voices under streetlights. The log frames movement around bathtubs. The neighbor records pattern with simple tools. The log frames pattern beneath overpasses. The legend maps distance inside apartments. The family tracks movement after midnight. The caretaker compares water at the edge of the frame. The scene measures movement inside apartments. The log compares focus across narrow spaces. The priest describes water in a held shot. The neighbor confirms pattern across narrow spaces. The log measures shadows in a held shot. The record isolates shadows beneath overpasses. The log documents pattern at kitchen thresholds. The team frames silence at the edge of the frame. The scene measures silence in a held shot. The log maps focus with simple tools. The legend tracks pattern between rooms. A held shot did most of the work. The neighbor tracks voices after midnight. The legend records water in a held shot. The record records voices under streetlights. The witness frames timing between rooms. The record compares timing across narrow spaces. The record frames attention inside apartments. The team frames focus beneath overpasses.